What's up, guys? I want to show you guys some really big news out of Philly. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but I was born in Philly and raised in Jersey, right over the Ben Franklin Bridge. I spent most of my childhood in Philadelphia, skateboarding all over the city with all my friends. It was a great time, a great childhood through skateboarding in Philly. And at that time, it was a completely different city. But now Philly, the culture, everything has changed a lot over the last 5 years. But what's happening now through all of these new policy changes, I believe we could see a complete collapse of the economy. We could see real estate values fall. We could see a mass rise in unemployment, and we could just see crime going through the roof. Here's what just happened. This just dropped like 4 or 5 minutes ago. Let me share this with you guys. So this just came out 5 hours ago, 5 hours ago. So this just came out, and what this is going to look like is that every person working within the city must complete this, right, by January. So you say, okay, well, how big of a problem is this? How many workers are in Philly? Well, 25,000 people. So Philadelphia is not the biggest city, but the way that Philly is laid out, you have a variety of universities. So you have UPenn, Drexel, Temple. Those are scattered throughout the center city. But within that area, like for example, Temple is all working class people for the most part. You know, it's getting a little bit more modernized and gentrified now, but Philadelphia as a whole always has been more of a working class city, unlike, you know, a city like New York, for example, which is, you know, a lot of money flows into New York and flows out of New York. Philadelphia wasn't always like that. But what I think is very likely to happen is that we're going to start to see what's happening in New York and what's happening in Los Angeles happen in Philadelphia, and unfortunately also probably in New Jersey as well, and continue. And so what they're saying here is that the city will apply to all union reps in Philly, regardless of location of work, including part-time, seasonal, temporary city employees. New release from Philly also apply to all embedded city contractors, so anybody doing any work with the city. So this could be 50 or 60,000 people. Police officers, also firefighters. And so we could see a situation where there's strikes, where police departments walk out and, you know, fire departments walk out, because not everyone's going to say, okay, sounds good. I think the rate before it was something along the lines of 60%. 60, let me see, I think it was 62% is what they said so far have already said okay. So the other 32 or 38% have yet not to. So we could see a lot of people, a lot of the infrastructure in Philly walk out. Those that don't get it will be, not could be, most likely will be fired. City employees who failed will be considered unable to perform their duties, will be informed that they may no longer report to work, and will be carried on unpaid status for no longer than 15 working days. At the end of that period, if they have not started their schedule, they will be separated from employment. That says it all. You look at what's happening in what happened in New York, where they weren't allowed to file for unemployment benefits. So the question I ask myself is, if this does in fact happen, right, and we do have this inflation problem, most people don't have, you know, 6 months reserves in the bank. They will most likely either, if they're not going to, they're probably going to default on their rent, right? Which I believe that all of these new modifications, mandates, will push forward a lot of weight onto the backs of landlords, mom and pop landlords that already are struggling, because people are going to say, hey, it's either that or feed myself. You know, so they're going to feed themselves first, and then the landlord's going to pick up the bag. But right now, unfortunately, a lot of mom and pop landlords, which is most landlords are not the Invitation Homes type large corporation. It's mainly working class people that own a duplex or a triplex or one building or two buildings. So a lot of these people have already been struggling, and now we're going to see a situation where a lot a lot of landlords are also going to get hit with this as well. So city workers can apply for it on medical ground. But I mean, I don't think this is going to be the easiest thing in the world. I think they're actually going to follow up pretty rigorously with this. So I don't think that's just going to be an easy out for people. To be considered, a person must be 2 weeks out from their, as public servants, we bear the responsibility, right? So we owe it to the city and to ourselves, right? So, but it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy how fast this is all changing. The city's hoping, so they're going to give a $300 bonus. So you can go get go get something for $300. But this is how this is all going to look, right? So you got 25,000 workers, right? But anyone also that does business with the city of Philadelphia. So, a lot of subcontractors. This could be 50,000 people, right? And then you have cops, 6,300 cops. So if, for example, they said that 38% have not yet. So you could see a situation where 2,500 of these cops, maybe half of them walk, right? So maybe 1,250 cops walk. That would then give a situation for the city to probably have a staffing problem, right? Well, I don't know if they'd have to bring in additional help or if they'd have to, I don't know what they would do, right? This is also going to likely be nurses. It's going to be all throughout the city, right? Probation officers, parole officers, firefighters, social workers. Philadelphia has a very, very large percentage of people that are on government assistance that are, struggling financially, that really need social assistance, and they have their social workers. If they lose 500 of these or 600 of these, and then you couple that with the firefighters, you couple that with parole, couple that with city cops, this is all gonna, and then trash men. This is actually a really big deal that most people don't realize is sanitation workers play a major role in our society. Without them, even if you just lost 20 to 30% of them, you would start to see a massive infill of trash all over the streets everywhere and bringing in disease and rodents. It'll be a problem, right? But right now, Philly has a 5% inflation, right, is what they're claiming. But this is what I find very fascinating to me, is that they say Philadelphia rents have increased more than the national average, and many MSAs included in the analysis far outpaced that rate of growth. The Philadelphia metro area, right? But they're saying that they have basically 11% increase in rental growth so far, right? So far this year, 11%. That's massive. So most rents grow at about 3% a year. So they're looking at about 4 years worth of rental growth inside 1 year. So the big question I ask myself is, this is likely happening. I mean, they've said it's happening. Philadelphia is a working class city. Philadelphia is it's not the richest place in the world. There are some great universities. There are some very well-off areas such as Rittenhouse Square. There's many nice areas throughout Philadelphia. But for the most part, Philadelphia is surrounded by communities that are struggling. And the question I ask myself is, if these people say no, what will happen is I bet that these people will go where the money is, because, it's human nature. The animal nature is within humans. If they're pushed up into a corner and they're basically said, hey, if you're not going to get food, you're not going to have any money anymore, what's going to happen? I think that the desirability of Philly could change. And just looking at it, same thing with LA, same thing with New York, same thing with a lot of these expensive places. The desirability is going to change if tourism drops, jobs are lost, and the city has a situation where they don't have the infrastructure that they once had. Even you look at like these expensive universities, they no longer make as much sense financially as they once did. It made sense 10 years ago to go to Drexel and spend $100,000 to get a degree, or go to UPenn, or go to one of these nice business schools like Wharton. It made sense then. But right now, you're going to deal with all of these new changes, and then the world's changing so fast, the economy's changing so fast. Who knows if the career that you're pursuing and now will even be relevant in 5 years or 10 years when you're actually putting it all to use. So we start losing our students. What ultimately is going to happen is a lot of capital is going to leave the city. I mean, what do you guys think about what's going on in Philly? It's crazy to me because when I grew up there, that city was like rough and raw. It was very, very raw. Now it seems so much. It has many more traits in line with Los Angeles and New York, but that's all fresh and it's all new. And I think what they did really is that they were able to kind of mellow out that city through the universities, through the big schools there. They brought in the education, and then the education flowed throughout the city, and then similar train of thought continued to progress. And now the city is completely different. The policies are so much different today than they were just a couple of years ago. But yeah, that's the big question I ask myself. They say 38% of people have not yet in Philly. We could see a situation coming very soon, right after the holiday season. People are they say on average, people spend about $1,000 every single person on the Christmas holiday, the new year. So they're going to be stepping into more debt, more expense, and then a lot of people are going to be pushed against the corner to make a decision. My bet is that there will be people that will make a decision against one that will relate to a job. So they could end up losing their job. And the only other question I ask myself is, what will be the solution for these people? Is probably going to either be crime or relocating to an area that's going to be more affordable, that's going to be able to offer them a business opportunity. It won't be in Philadelphia. So we could see a ton of people leaving Philly. But I have so many stories of like growing up and like all throughout that city. Like I almost got robbed so many times, skateboarding with video cameras all throughout like Temple. There's a main strip in Philly called Broad Street. And when you're going around with a camera that's $1,000 and you're 4 foot nothing like I was going throughout that city, you're an easy target. But now that whole area, and I didn't get robbed by the way, but close calls many times. But now that whole area has changed. It's all gentrified. It's so interesting and so fascinating how fast that city has changed. But just outside of Temple, just outside of Drexel, just outside, like in West Philly, these areas are real poverty. There's some real poverty there, and some people that I think believe something completely against what the mainstream is telling them to believe. And I think that a lot of people are going to stick to their guns, and we could see some big spikes in crime all throughout Philly. And it'll be very interesting. It's very unfortunate to see how this all plays out in the coming, unfortunately, it's like 90 days, not even, it's like 60 days, January 15th. So, we're right now November 19th. You're talking, 50 days. 50 days, we're going to see what's going to happen right in the dead smack of the winter. But it's quite fascinating to see how this is all happening. 11% in, this is the other thing that people don't realize. So let's just put everything as extremely conservative, because I don't want anything to be no fear, none of that. Rents have increased 11%, right? And so what happens when real estate investors see rental growth is most of them say, hey, this is a gold rush. I'm going to refinance my property. So they're going to take out a loan against their asset. Generally, they take as much as they can out, especially now because rates are low and the dollar is dying, and the dollar is worth more in your hand today than it will be tomorrow. So they're taking the money out and they're reinvesting it into hard assets, right? So let's say they have $1 million property and they came to that evaluation through this newfound rental growth that they've seen in their building of 11%, right? So they go take out now they have a new loan of say $800,000, right? But now let's say that rents, they lose this 11%. Maybe they lose 11% plus they lose another 5% or another 4% because job opportunities fade, right? So maybe rents drop 15 or 16% from here, which is not a big deal because rents just rose 11% last year alone. So if they lose that 16%, what would happen is you'd see a lot of investors carrying their buildings at a loss. In addition to that, you would also see a lot of people that have not yet complied that are just simply saying, I only have so much money. The money's not going to the landlord. It's going to feed myself and to feed my kids. So landlords in Philly are going to have a situation that they're forced into right now where they're going to have a lot more tenants that simply will likely not be paying. So they could have rents fall, then they could have tenants not paying, and then what they're likely going to have are going to be more policies that are against, the free markets in Philly. They're going to likely push in more types of programs such as rent control and things like that are very common in Los Angeles and New York that I'm very, very familiar with. And these policies make it very challenging for a landlord to operate a successful business, a successful enterprise. Now, unfortunately, the entire city, for the most part, schools, police departments, street services, trash, how all of these are paid for is property tax revenue. So taxes in Philly, you'll pay a fraction of the property's value. So in Los Angeles, it's 1.25%. I'm not sure what it is in Philly. Probably somewhere around the same, right? So $1 million property, maybe you paid the city $700 or whatever per month, right? So you pay this amount, and ultimately that money is distributed throughout the city. But what's interesting here is if values are falling and people are losing their properties, tax revenue is going to fall. So they're going to have less funding for police. They've already lost police, so they likely already will with all this modification, these changes. So they're going to lose police, and then they're going to lose funding. And that's not going to just stop at police. It's going to go to fire departments, it's going to go to social workers, it's going to go to street services. And the whole city is going to lose that capital allocation. They're going to lose their employees, and there's going to be less people that are going to be held accountable for crimes. It's a very sad situation in America. So when we're seeing all this stuff, it's a shame, because Philly, to me, I was very blessed as a kid to grow up and skateboard in Philly and to have my childhood there, because it was all the people I was around, very tough kids. No one was afraid of anything, and it was, I think, the way that I was meant to be raised. Now Philadelphia, we're going to be stepping back into a whole new level of Philly, and so I'm hoping that it all doesn't happen, but they're literally saying 38% of people are pushed into a corner. They have to make a decision in the next 50 days. And my bet is that maybe half of those people, half of that 38%, make a decision to say no. And if that does happen, they're not going to pay rent. They're going to have to either move, they're going to default on their rent, or they're going to go out there and get the money with any means necessary. But yeah, crazy times. Drop your comments in here. Let's talk about it. Art of Horror, let's see. Now as a kid in Philly, everyone used to. Kids in Philly, bad and they'll hurt you. Yeah, but I'm telling you, one good thing. Someone said the kids in Philly are bad, they'll hurt you. One good thing about being around people that maybe fit that category are they teach you street smarts. You start to see things that, like, when you're young and you're in a city, like a center city like that, where you have to look over your shoulder, you're constantly reevaluating the people around you. You're looking for opposing threats. You're you grow up and you achieve street smarts, which is a completely different level of intelligence you cannot learn at a 4-year university. 4-year university, you get one, an academic version of intelligence, but street smarts teaches you something that I think, for me personally, I think it almost brings more value to your everyday life than something you can get into from a traditional college. So I was very blessed to be around that, but to be around that type of culture young, because it grows up. When you grow up, you're built almost like an entrepreneur, because you're constantly thinking of your next competitor, your next threat, your next potential loss, what you can do to mitigate it. You're thinking like that. And yeah, I mean, I think it was awesome. Street smarts, yep. Been to Philly. It was rough police stations. Yeah, if you go to Philly, that's how it was. Philly is a dump. Yeah, but Philly is actually, it was. Now it's expensive. Like if you go to Rittenhouse Square, if you go to like Old City, Fishtown, all these areas, it's expensive. You'll spend $1 million, $1.5 million to get something. And 5 years ago, you could have got that same property for half the price. So we're just seeing this huge spike in attractiveness to Philly. But I think all of that is very much in question. I think that the entire city is being forced to a corner, really, being forced into a corner. And if rents drop because job opportunity drops and opportunity basically fades away, people are going to be leaving. And I think it'll be even more attention to other states. If you can work from home, people are going to say, hey, why do I have to be here? Why do I have to deal with that? And they're going to go to those other states and just take money out of Philly. If I owned a bunch of property in Philly right now, my number one priority would make sure that I am not over leveraged. I don't want to have 80% debt on all these properties and then step into this situation of a field of uncertainty, But I'll catch you guys on the next live stream. And hit the notification bell if you want to be updated on my future lives. Subscribe here and smash that like button. All right, guys, catch you later.